we're going to talk about Central America and the Caribbean. So, lots of countries to talk about. So, we're looking at this area here. So, Belize all the way down to Panama. And then we're going to talk about these Caribbean nations in here. We're not really going to get into the Lesser Antilles so much, but more of the Greater Antilles right in here. So, all right, here we go. So the people. So the first inhabitants were indigenous people, obviously. There's people of Mayan descent that make up about half of the indigenous population in Guatemala. Costa Rica, most people there are from European descent. But Africans first arrived in the area as enslaved people, and slavery will end in the late 1800s. But in the Bahamas, majority of the people there are of African descent. Urban challenges. So people migrate to the cities in search of work. Once again, that's known as urbanization. Like we talked about with Mexico, most people don't find it. And then the city's resources as a result are being depleted because the population is just growing and growing in the cities, which is causing a collapse of the city's infrastructure. So you're seeing like crumbling buildings, like roads that aren't up to snuff, and sewage systems that don't work, and things like that. And so people are being deprived of basic necessities, things that we take for granted, like electricity and water and things like that. Most of those people who do go to the cities stay in the cities, many because they just can't afford to get back. And once again, like we talked about with Mexico, there's not a whole lot of reason, to go back to the villages anyway. There's a reason why they left. It's because they thought there was a better life in the city. So, okay, history and government. So we're going to start with European conquest. So Columbus's voyages led to Spanish exploration and colonization. So the first place he landed was the island of Hispaniola. So that includes Haiti and the Dominican Republic. There's those two nations on that island. The Spanish easily conquered the Native Americans, and then they forced them to work in gold mines and on plantations. And with the hard labor, starvation, and then European diseases nearly wiping them out, a lot of that labor kind of went away. And so to replace that, the Europeans started to import Africans to the Caribbean and Central America to replace that native population to have a larger labor force. So the Columbian Exchange, this is basically the movement of plants and animals and diseases between Europe and the Americas. So they're going to engage in something known as triangular trade. Okay, so we'll start like with Spain. Okay, so let's say they make rum. Okay, in Spain, and they send that rum to Africa. Africa, usually down here, sends slaves over to the Caribbean, and the Caribbean they send molasses over to Spain. So that's triangular trade. But this whole movement of all of this is known as the Columbian Exchange. So Spain, Portugal, France, and Britain are going to be moving goods throughout the Americas. The Panama Canal. So we talked about the Panama Canal when we talked about the geography of Latin America. But the Panama Canal is on the Isthmus of Panama. So Vasco Nunez, who was an explorer, was the first to grasp the geographic features of what is the Isthmus of Panama. So this is going to lead to the idea of creating a shortcut to the Pacific. So the idea is if you carve through the land there and connect the two oceans, it's much shorter, and it is. Okay, so in 1904, the Panama Canal finally was done. At first, it was the French that were building it, and then they kept getting malaria and dying, so they stopped. So the U.S., wanting to take over for the French, excuse me, got a cough. So anyway, so the Americans wanted to take over for the French. Panama at the time was controlled by Colombia, and the Americans decided that we're going to support the Panamanians in a revolt against Colombia to gain the rights to build the canal. So we do, and then we built it, and now we use it all the time. Um, we had the rights to it for a very long time. We had a 100-year lease on it, and then in 2004 we gave it over to the Panamanians. So they now control it. It's a very, very valuable piece of land. Okay, gaining independence. So Haiti was the first to get independence in 1804, first in this area, when they won a revolt by Francois Toussaint Louverture. Cuba is going to win independence in 1898 from Spain. This was during the Spanish-American War, and so we had Cuba under our protection, so they were a protectorate of the U.S. until 1902. Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands are still to this day territories of the U.S. And you're going to need to know that. So there's Puerto Rico right there. Okay, and there's Cuba right there that we're talking about, Haiti, and then that's Dominican Republic. 1823, the independent Central American provinces are going to form a federation known as the United Provinces of Central America. And then these guys were led by powerful elites, but eventually they're going to separate into separate countries of Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. So the 20th century is going to bring about a lot of political changes. So like I said before, we backed the Panamanians in an independence movement from Colombia in 1903. They gave us the rights to build the Panama Canal. We did. We profited off of it for 100 years. With more industries, railroads, and trade, the upper classes are gaining more and more wealth, and they continued all throughout the 20th century to ignore the lower classes' demands for reforms to help them out. In 1959, Fidel Castro is going to take control of Cuba. He is going to make Cuba a communist country. If you ever go to Cuba today, it looks like you're in the 1950s. Like the cars look like they're from the 50s, and that's because their technology has basically been stuck in the 50s as a result of communism. And today, many countries are battling political corruption and violence, and more people, more people have been voting, but they are slow to reform. So, culture, language and religion. So, Spanish obviously is the primary language for most of these countries, especially Central America. In the Caribbean, it kind of depends on which country took them over as to what language they speak. So, English, Spanish, French, Dutch are all spoken in the Caribbean, but each country has its own unique dialect. So, a dialect being a form of language that's unique to a particular region. And many Native American languages are spoken still. So, for example, Patois is dialects that kind of have blended the indigenous, the European, African, and Asian languages together. As far as religion goes, most are Roman Catholic in Central America. And so, once again, this depends on which country conquered you. So, the French and the Spanish speaking Caribbean nations are Catholic too. Because the French and the Spanish, when they conquered them, were Catholic and they forced up their religion on them. And the other nations, like the Virgin Islands, for example, there's the U.S. Virgin Islands and there's also the British Virgin Islands. So in both of those places, it's it's Protestantism that's the main religion, English being the language that's spoken there. Other faiths would include Hinduism, Islam, indigenous religions, and then African. And some have kind of blended religions like Santeria and Voodoo. So Voodoo being this is from the Princess and the Frog. But Voodoo is probably the more familiar of those blended religions. Education. So children are generally required to complete elementary school, but many don't because of long distances to school and lack of money. As far as the arts go, it's very diverse. So Native Americans have made early art. So they did like wood carvings, pottery, metalwork, weaving. But then the music there combines the Native American, the European, and the African styles. And so it kind of has created a very unique like Caribbean style of music or Central American style of music. But the styles evolved from the musical traditions of the indigenous wind and percussion instruments, the European string instruments, and African drums, rhythms, and dances. All right, family life. So in Central America, this is very similar to Mexico, where the importance is on the extended family. In the Caribbean, families are much more matriarchal. So this means that the family is ruled by a woman. Usually, it's the oldest woman, so a mother, grandmother, whoever's the oldest. And this was because this was a major characteristic of West Africa, and because they're much more influenced in the Caribbean by African culture. That's why that still exists. As far as sports and leisure, baseball is the big sport in this area. So baseball, basketball, volleyball are most popular, but baseball is by far the most popular sport. Um, and obviously, they learned it from the U.S., who taught it to the Cubans, and then spread throughout the Caribbean. So there's a lot of players that come from this area, like Yadier Molina, for example, Albert Pujols, Adrian Beltre. That's who those two guys are. There's tons and tons of Major League Baseball players who have come from this area. Okay, so one of the things, excuse me, I did last summer was I went to Jamaica, and one of the really cool things that I learned about Jamaica was how they built their houses. And this is kind of an example of it. So, what they do is they save up a bunch of money and then they build a room. Like they put four walls up and a roof, and then that's where they live. And then they save up more money and they build a second room, and then they build a third room. And so they just add on basically room by room, where like we just buy a whole house. But you could see, as long as they are continuing to build their house, they don't have to pay taxes. So if you go to like Jamaica or any Caribbean nation, really, you'll see a lot of this, like with the rebar coming out the top and homes that look like they're unfinished, but people live there, and that's because they get such a big tax break if they're still building the house. So this right here is a video I made driving down. So we went to Negril in Jamaica, and we drove from Montenegro to Negril, which is basically Montenegro's kind of, if you think of like the of Jamaica like an oval. Okay, Montenegro's kind of on the basically close to the top of the oval, and Negril is like over to the left of the oval. And so it was a pretty long ride. It was about 2 hours to get there, but we went through some towns and that, and I called shotgun on the driver on the way back to the airport, and I asked him if he wouldn't mind kind of telling me some things about what's going on, like what we're seeing and stuff. So this is my video taken of him explaining some things. He's got a very thick accent. I'm gonna turn this up as loud as I can. He's got a very thick accent, so it is kind of hard to understand him. But just do your best, and here it goes.
1777, and also an old fort is at the end of it. It's a school over here too.
Over here. Oh, that's the preparatory?
Yes.
Okay, so that building you just saw, the yellow one, that is the elementary school. It's a private school. It's a preparatory school. So that's what that was there. Okay.
So the Fort Charlotte, old fort.
Fort Charlotte is right down that street right there. The school that was 1777.
Yes, around that side.
So they drive on the wrong side of the road, and it was scary. And this road is like their highway. It's kind of like their
Dolphin
interstate.
Head Mountain. It's up there, and why they call it Dolphin Head Mountain is because it's shaped like a dolphin.
Oh yeah, it kind of is. Yeah.
You know, I born close to that mountain there. That's where I born.
Yeah, I didn't see
There's
that.
a
I was
mineral
just saying
spring
that.
up there. That's where I get my water. So I carry my jug and fill them up and fill this every day to drink my mineral water during the day. And it's healed my knee. Yep. I didn't have a pain in my knee. Now it's over 3 years. That pain has gone. So we're coming up on that courthouse you see there. That's an old courthouse. So the clock on the top there, the top shaped like German helmet. That clock come from Germany, but that clock project to go to St. Lucia, but by mistake it end up in Lucy. The governor said we love it, don't send it back.
Okay,
This is
so I'm going to explain this here. He's talking about this right here. So this looked like a German helmet from World War II, or World War One. I'm sorry, but it was supposed to go to Saint Lucia, the island of Saint Lucia, but it went. They spelled it wrong or something, I guess. So it went to Lucy in Jamaica, and they liked it so much that they just kept it. He said.
This is the tax office right here, and downstairs in that building there, it was where the Rastaman was begging money in Cool Runnings, Jamaica bobsled team, in that building right here. So that building is in the movie.
Okay. Another thing they do is they reference Cool Runnings a lot. They are very proud of the movies that were made in Jamaica. So Cool Runnings, and he'll reference a James Bond movie that was made in Jamaica too.
So this is the town of Lucy. On the right, coming up, right across from this bus here, is the marketplace in Cool Runnings was over here. Where they have the marketplace.
So that's this area you're looking at here. Yeah, people just walk through there. They have no fear. It's insane. Didn't even stop at the intersection there.
So these are two of the bank, and one up that side, and the Scotia Bank now has closed down. So it's over here you get the appliance courts, and also you have the juicy patty. On this side.
Juicy patty.
Juicy patty.
Patty.
This wall is in the movie Cool Runnings when the guy was driving a car to find John Candy in the club. He was driving along.
He gets so
strip
close to
here.
this lady, it's scary. She's fine.
So that point where you see looking at the left point there is where the Fort Charlotte, and you see the building below it is the school that found 1777. And over the other side now you have the harbor and also the hotel you're looking at over that side.
Okay, so now we're starting to move out of town. So you can see the houses are getting smaller. Buildings that are getting smaller because they're houses. So this is more on the outskirts of the town. And the farther out we get, the more kind of ragged they get.
It's in Cool Runnings. It's where the guy drive into the club in here, but the club is not there anymore. But the fire hydrant is still there. So if you watch about the movie, you will see the club, but on the fire hydrant. But when you come, you won't see the club again anymore. What is in the movie? Remember I said the road was smaller to go to Montego Bay? So the bank was much closer.
Okay, so I'm going to stop right here. So where this van's coming out, this used to be the old highway, I guess, of Jamaica. So what happened is the Japanese actually put a lot of money into Jamaica. They've done a lot of investments. That's why almost all the cars are Toyotas, by the way. But they built this road that goes all the way around the island of Jamaica. And that's the road we're on. This road here is the road that they used to use. And this was a 2-lane road. You can see this van barely fits through. Okay, this was a 2-lane road before Japan did this. And it was basically just like a dirt road, and it was crazy dangerous. And you're looking at this new road that he's actually driving on, and you're probably thinking, wow, that's not a good one. But it's way better than what this was, because we were on this kind of road for a little while when we were going to our resort, and it was kind of scary. Okay.
mall right down there to hit off the top of the bus and the police car running it and they run down into the river. Live and Let Die, James Bond, Roger Moore. So this road was smaller, so James Bond get chased by the police car going that way on this strip here. In Live and Let Die.
And now you can see, like, we're really getting on the outskirts of the town. There, and so, like, you can see the different houses and that and kind of how they live. So, all right, that's all I got for you today. Don't forget to do your processor. So your processor is the 10 test questions. Make sure you highlight the correct answers. Okay, and make sure it's all 10 questions, too, that you answered, not just the first 5. All right, have a good day.